So before we dive into the panel, I'll let our panel members introduce themselves and tell us who they are, the company they work in, and what's their role in it.
Hi, I'm Dave Yonamine. I'm the founder and chairman of MobilityWare. So we're a casual game company based out of Southern California, so not San Francisco, but halfway between LA and San Diego. And we're a company of about 200 employees, all based at that location. And we're focused on casual games, and obviously we're probably best known for solitaire, but we do other casual games, some social casino and match 3 games as well.
Hello, my name is Jan, and I work at Berlin-based publisher Wooga. And we're mostly developing casual and hidden object games for, let's say, middle-aged women. And in this company, I'm responsible for ad monetization.
Hello, my name is Cem Ocalan. I work for Gram Games. We are a London-based studio, if you don't know, that produced hyper-casual games, now getting into IAP games with top-grossing titles.
Cool. And I'm Ayala. I work at SafeDK. And the reason we have everyone here is to talk about the hidden metrics that hurt your bottom line. So when we thought about this panel, we thought that in most cases, those panel are how to increase your revenue, how to use in-app purchases better in the design game, how to place more ads in a smarter way. And seldomly, we talk about the things that hurt your bottom line, like tech issues and ad issues. And we at SafeDK try to help with those things. And we're here to talk about those and how we can better treat those issues to improve not only our revenue, but mainly the profit line. So let's get started. So we start, with the top things. I'd be happy for each of and every one of you to share a nightmare story that you had with a specific issue. It doesn't need to be something about a specific issue, but like a nightmare story that you remember every time that you think about something bad that happens.
Yes, because yes. So the one I was thinking of is embarrassing, of course, so that makes the best story. There was a situation that occurred with our company and rewarded videos in particular, where customers were complaining about not being given their rewards. But of course, they didn't do a good job of explaining what it was, what the situation was, or who the ad network was, or of course, they don't care about that. But it took us basically a month to track it down because of the poor reporting and the fact that obviously not everyone gets the same video, so you can track it. But yeah, it took us a month to track down a problem with rewarded videos and users not getting the rewards that they were due.
So my story was luckily not taking a full month, but it was still, I think, 10 days, which was impacting our game. And it was in our latest game, June's Journey, where we had in one platform, we had a major issue with ads, where it was just a white screen shown to users instead of the ad, and they couldn't proceed, they couldn't close, they couldn't get their reward, and so on. And since the rewarded videos in this case as well were so deeply integrated into the gameplay, they couldn't just progress any further in the game. And so we said, okay, we have seen like from our bottom line of tickets we're getting from users about video ads, product kind of 20 per day, jumped up to 500 on one day. And so we said, okay, that's a really, really bad example and really bad situation. And so we just made a switch to say, okay, you're just getting reward anyway. You don't have to watch a video. Here's your reward. Go ahead. And we're just going to try to fix it in the back end. And after 10 days, we fix it and we turn it on again to get our revenues from the ads finally again.
Well, for us, it was a crash case actually in a certain game, in an ad-based game that we had. Basically, it was before a high season, so it was more critical, more stressful. But we couldn't find the crash for a while in our QA department and also with crash logging. So we did go to customers and try to reproduce the event and change our stack to it. Luckily, we had a new stack in the way, so we could take that build earlier and test it with the users with the ad hoc beta kind of testing. So we released, and it was a high season for us as well. So it turned out to be good, but it was a stressful time, I guess. I
imagine, like, looking at the bottom line being lower than what you usually are used to.
Yeah, I mean, this was apparent in the DAUs and session times, so we were quite aware of the issue. It was hard to track, though.
Cool. So we asked you guys what was the biggest issues, what was the biggest cause of issues in the app. So two of you, I don't know, it was anonymized, so I don't know which one of you said ads and one said crashes. So I think we'll touch those subjects and talk about those. So we talked about what is the major impact in the company. So how does it look like when there's a major crash in the app? So maybe we can start with you, Jem. When there's, you know, a huge crash in the app, how does it look like in the company? Is there like a lot of more developers working on it? How do you realize that it's a huge case of, you know, it's something that needs to be taken care of now?
Well, as I said, we firstly look at the impact. How much does it impact our revenue? How much does it impact the user experience and everything? So we start with, like, for ad-based games, the AU, and then session times. Because if you're seeing a crash, it might not be a huge issue, but it might be also like a widespread global issue. So we first look at that and actually scale our response to it according to that. So it would be like we would, if it's a high impact issue, we would put development time, QA time in it, and yeah.
So not all crashes are born equally, right?
Yeah.
There can be a major crash which can be, I know, like in the background, for example.
Yeah.
Then you wouldn't do anything about it.
Well, you would.
Or you would like less resources.
Yeah, you would take it into the normal production pipeline and try to fix it there. But if it's something that's majorly impactful, you would respond quickly.
Got it.
It's pretty much the same for Wooga. I mean, it's really about the scale, right? If it's a super bad crash, but it's only happening for, let's say, 0.1% of users, yeah, you don't really care about it so much. But if it's like a middle bad crash and it's affecting 80% of users, everyone will jump on it, right? So developers, customer support to support you with your communication, and whoever is also kind of working on this topic. So if it's any kind of ad-related topic, it's also me jumping on it. But if it's more like a game-related issue, then mostly the game teams working on it.
Yeah, we're quite similar as well. Typically, it would be customer service that gets notified first because users are complaining. And I think one thing that we've learned is we've tried to make it easy to contact us, to send us emails and things. Maybe we've taken that overboard because we'll get thousands of emails a day. And fortunately, most of them are blank, so they're inadvertent emails. But we still get a lot, and then customer service handles them. But if it's anything substantial, then ad operations gets involved. And then if it is really a bug, then QA gets involved again, and then developers. But fortunately, most of the time, ad operations can deal with it because there are bad ads or inappropriate ads. And if it's a situation that's quite overt, like a bad SDK from a developer, hopefully we can turn that off, you know, immediately without having the developers getting involved or another release having to go out.
That's a little addition to that. So I think when it's a game-related bug coming from our own coding, I think we are much faster and easier to find out about it because we're doing a kind of stage rollout, we're testing it internally, we're doing a 2, 5, 20, 50% rollout, and then we're much easier able to see it and find out about it. But if it's some kind of bad ad which is coming in on the server side and to all users at the same time, it's having a much quicker and bigger impact than anything you are doing in your own game, I think.
Thank you. We also ask you about ANRs. ANRs, for those of you who don't know this term, it's app not responding. It's this is what it means. It's unique to Android today, and it means that the app is freezing for 5 seconds or more. And moving forward, Google just announced that they're gonna crash apps where they detect ANRs. And I think currently they're the only ones that are displaying it. So it's not another service. I'm not gonna name names, but basically you have to go to Google Console to see those. And for me, I know most of you are using iPhones, but as an Android user, I know for me it's a worse experience when the app freezes because you don't know what's happening. And after a few seconds, then there's a pop-up that the app freezes. So I'm wondering from you, and I see there's like an equal split between you guys when we asked what's the impact, if it's a similar impact to crashes, and if you're handling this the same. So maybe we can start with you, Dave, this time.
Right. No, basically we handle them pretty much the same way because to the end user, whether it really is an ANR or if it's a crash, neither one is good, and it impacts the user the same way. So we treat them the same way.
I have to admit, I'm the one not sure here. So, yeah, it's pretty much the same with approach that we say, okay, if it's a bad user experience, it's bad and we have to react on it, no matter if it's a crash or ANR or whatever you want to call it. However, there's probably some differentiation to crashes, but we also have to admit that we are not really into those details yet and have to figure out what the difference is, how we can deal with that, and so on. And getting data about it is really good, and then we have to figure out later on how we can deal with this and how we can improve it.
Well, I'm the less impact one, I guess. So, I mean, in our case, we didn't have as big an issue with ANRs as we did with crashes just yet. So we still monitor them and look into them, but we didn't have a case where it was as strongly impactful as crashes just yet.
That's good.
Yeah, it's good.
Cool. So let's talk about. So we talked about like more technical, hardcore stuff. Let's talk about ads, which everyone likes to talk about. So we can start with your worst ad story. Everyone, I don't know if anyone haven't heard about the Rihanna ad that appeared in Snapchat and caused a $1 billion loss in a day after she tweeted that that's not appropriate. So I think that's their worst ad story. As a user, I've experienced few, but I'm like, Jan, maybe you can start by telling about your worst one.
Yeah, I mean, when we prepared the session, I think I told you a story about something, but right before the panel, I told you a different story, and I think that's the better one to share. So it was actually a very disturbing story that a user came to us and saying that she saw an ad about weapons and weapons being glorified and promoted. And she was, I think, from Texas or Florida, and she was associating this ad with the shootings at schools, which they had in the recent months there. And so we said, wow, that's really, really bad, and we definitely don't want to have our games to be associated with any kind of shootings or anything similar. And so, yeah, that was one of the very few tickets I was personally writing back to her and saying, yeah, I really want to care about it, and I really want to help you guys out about this. And yeah, it's not finished yet because it was just recently, but it was a really bad experience. Yeah.
Well, for us, it was basically like an inappropriate ad and phishing ads. If you have seen it, it's like you won iPhone or something like that. That the user, like in the regular iOS UI, it was the worst case we actually had and invested our time on. We solved it later on, but this is like a area where when you have multiple networks in, you don't know the source, it's harder to track, it's harder to shut down, basically. And it's not global, it's mostly local.
Right.
So, yeah, that was one of our constant struggles.
Yeah. I think this was recently?
No.
Oh, okay.
This was the old story, so...
Yeah. Because now you can
Yep.
with us.
Yes.
So for us, the worst ad story, I guess, comes in two flavors. I mean, For us, the company, it was the one I mentioned before where we couldn't figure out the cause of the ad problems for a month. That's clearly bad. For the end user, well, I guess it impacts the end user as well because they aren't happy. But the one that we sort of looked at from another aspect were political ads in our last election. And we already banned political ads, but of course, all our ad networks and other sources just ignore all those things. So we still get political ads even though they're not allowed. And doesn't matter which side you're on, the other side is always, very upset by the fact that you had one of those.
Cool. So yeah, let's talk about things in ads other than technical issues, which we discussed, that are driving revenue out. So we asked if you're allowing competitor apps in your app, and I wanted to get more of your take into. There's like different approaches, blacklisting, not blacklisting, blacklisting some competitors or not. But I think what we saw is that in some cases, it doesn't necessarily even needs to be a competitor to drive users away and hurt your revenue. So I'm wondering what's your take on it, if it's more data-driven approach or more something that you're, you think that this is what's driving your revenue away, and this is why you're blacklisting or not blacklisting, that it's okay, that it's as long as the user clicks and installs, he gave your money back worth. So, Dave.
Okay, so I guess it's somewhat complicated. I wouldn't say it's sophisticated, but it's somewhat complicated. So here's an example. Of course, our company is known for solitaire games. We're also one of the I think the largest jigsaw puzzle developer in the App Store. So if someone wants to display a jigsaw puzzle ad in our solitaire games, we do allow it. But we wouldn't allow a jigsaw puzzle game in our jigsaw game. Okay, so if it's that close, then we will attempt to block it. Otherwise, we basically let them through.
Okay. For us, it's really on a game team side. So we have one team per game pretty much, and each game team can decide on their own if they want to allow those type of ads or not. But I think in the end, it's really coming down to one person's opinion on this topic, because there's so much discussion around it. If it's bringing you just more revenue, but you keep your users in, or if you're losing users because of this, I think there's a lot of tests and discussions for both sides. And so far, there's not really any clear proof to say, okay, it's either or the other way. And so I'm pretty sure for the ad revenues, it would be better to show competitors' ads because it's just more similar content. But we haven't seen any real proof that it's in the long run, it's hurting your retention rate, your DAU, your IP revenue even. And so it's really down to the deciders on a game team basis how they want to approach this.
Yeah, I agree on that. There isn't actually any proof that we can generate because of the lack of data as well in the ad side to know if you lost a user basically for showing a competitor. So in our case, if it's not an obvious clone, which we have a lot, we don't block it.
But for example, if it's an obvious clone, maybe if the user clicks and installs the app, you would get the money from this user, that you spend. So why block it? Just because, and it goes to the same what you said, Dave, that in a jigsaw puzzle you wouldn't show jigsaw, but you would show it in another solitaire game. Right. So why would you decide to block? Just because it's irritating that they copied the game, or is it?
Well, for us, our clones are basically the same game. It's not like a type, but it's basically the same game and some slight team changes, even no team changes at all. So it's obviously not. We wouldn't encourage our users to download it.
Got it. I don't know why a user which already progressed in levels would want to switch to a clone, but that's another question.
Well, this is for our hyper-casual games, which is more on scores rather than levels.
Right.
So in general, for a level-based game, I wouldn't actually consider blocking a competitor. But for basically a hyper-casual game, that uses the mechanic only, the gameplay mechanic only. It's just the same game.
Right. Cool. So, so yeah, we talked about, which kind of content to show or not to show. And then this is a subtle and sensorized sample from what we grab at SafeDK. We alert about inappropriate content for publishers. I assure you that this is the best that we could find that we can show here. Some are really bad. We actually wanted to put a Trump ad, which we see a lot in the US, but there wasn't room. So you can see so bad ads, when we say about like inappropriate, it can be the immediate thought as, adult content, which is very popular. But then you have, for example, just on the right side, which this is an ad. I thought that this was like the actual call, but no, this is an ad for an app that shows screens when someone is calling you. So obviously, if you don't know that, and sometimes it appears mom, and then you would try to click on it, and you would realize that it was an ad. And also, we've seen a lot of people like Alan pass away in ads, football players and Clint Eastwood, and a lot of those like deceiving ads, which a lot of users, especially I think in the US and UK, but not only, are getting very irritated by. So how does those ads impact when the content is bad, not necessarily drives users away? It might, because the content is bad, but how those ads impact your company? Jam.
Well, for us, the games are hyper casual, so we are like serving to people at any age, basically. So content like this is some kind of a red line for us in terms of, because we know our user base and we know they're gonna be annoyed and churn out of the game, which we had, as I said, a couple of examples way back in time, where we could see the DAU decrease and increase in churn, and in local cases, not in the global ones. So we preemptively try to fix this issue. And as I said earlier, it's kind of was hard to track back then, because you need the exact links to find the networks. Right now, it's easier for us.
For us, it's also, in the end, it's about the down retention rate, right? But the more immediate impact are tickets from users into our customer support system, as well as App Store reviews. And obviously, when you're having a lot of bad ads, you're also getting more and more bad reviews, which is then pulling down your overall app rating. And so you're having also, in the end, less organic users, because it seems to be less attractive for the users. And so it's all coming down to user happiness, user satisfaction from existing users, as well as like the attractiveness for potential new users coming in for like pretty much no cost. And that's why it's really important for us to keep this whole system very clean. And luckily, we are pretty much able to do that on a good track.
I totally agree. I don't have anything really to add that's different. Yeah, we get more tickets because of it. The reviews go down, and then we think that inadvertently or indirectly affects other download for our apps.
So your answer leads me directly to the next one, which is going to be the last topic, the reviews and their impact. So I think both crashes, ANRs, bad ads. We didn't even touch, instances. I think one of the review talks about it when the ad is suddenly super loud, and you're in a meeting, you're in a classroom, and suddenly the ad starts playing. So all of those instances are causing, bad reviews. So let's talk about the impact, and how does it look in the company when you identify a bad review? How do you handle bad reviews? How do you make sure that the user that put the bad review potentially change it, and what's the impact within the company? So yeah, we ask you how you're handling, but if you could dig in a bit more on the impact, if you're seeing actually, like, if you have an instance of a lot of bad reviews, if you're directly seeing this impact and the in terms of ASO, and who's handling this in the company?
Yeah, I don't think I can quantify it to that level, but certainly we do worry about bad reviews, and we are, I won't say proactive in it, I think it's reactive to it. We will try to contact people if they do post a bad review, and we do the best we can to try to address their concerns. Obviously, they don't have to change the review or anything, but we do what we can on that. Because we do think at the high level, the system works pretty well, that reviews are indicative of the quality of the app, and we certainly share their frustration with getting things that they don't want. And we try hard to avoid that to the greatest extent that we can.
Again, I also fully agree. But to elaborate a bit more on it, I think it's also that we try to understand what the bad reviews are about. So is it about certain game features? Is it about missing game features? Is it about features in the game which are missing? Or is it about external content like ads? So we really try to understand if we have, like, I don't know, 100 bad reviews in the last few weeks or so, we try to understand, okay, what are the biggest clusters of reviews? And then we see, okay, it's maybe 3 different clusters, and one of them is ads, and then I try to look more into it and say, okay, it's mainly coming from one country or from one type of ad or anything which I can go deeper into it, and then I try to find out what's the reason and the cause of it and try to eliminate this reason so that we're not getting any more bad reviews about this cause.
For us, the reviews works more or less like a metric, but like an indicator, basically, of a problem that we could check out in our data and try to see. If it's like a game feature, we could investigate if what the user says is actually a general thing that we see in the app. If it's like an ad-based thing, we would look back on it and try to find the impact. So for each review is kind of like an alert for us. Rather than a metric that we track. Obviously, it affects marketing and store conversions. So, yeah, that's how we actually try to react to reviews.
Cool. Thank you. I think we have 1 minute left. So, so that's the last question for this time. So, yeah. We asked, when would you take an extreme measure? When would you update a version very quickly, or remove a partner, or remove them from the waterfall? So to what extent would you actually do something that externally, and when? So, Jam, let's start with you, and we have 1 minute, so.
Well, I actually mentioned it before. We released an update, basically to solve the crash issue in the initial story that I tell. But the stuff you mentioned is actually in our options, and we do consider it if it's going to fix our metrics and the user experience connected to that.
Thank you.
I mean, for us, it's always that we value the user experience way, way higher than any kind of short-term revenue. And so one of the examples you said was about taking a network out of a waterfall, which we had just recently, where we had a really nice deal with network. We said, okay, that's going to get us really nice revenues. But then, like, after 2 days of being live with that deal and with that network, we realized, okay, there were a lot of metrics and KPIs going to the wrong direction, and we said, okay, that's looking really, really bad, and we rather took them down and investigated instead of keeping it running and getting some revenue. And so it's always UX higher than revenue.
I think our approach is quite similar to Wooga's. So as far as taking it down, this didn't happen recently, but years ago, there was one instance where an ad network was so bad that we actually had to release sort of an emergency update to the app. But since that time, what it caused us to do was be able to turn off all our ad SDKs dynamically without having to have a release. So that's one thing that, we did 3 or 4 years ago. But most of the time, excuse me, most of the time it's just basically taking the ad out of the water, or the ad network out of the waterfall. And that's the extent of an extreme measure these days.
So you wouldn't remove it completely because there are issues? You would give them like the leeway to fix it and remove from the waterfall until they do it?
Right, but they're going to have to prove to us that they deserve to get back into the waterfall.
Got it.
I guess, I mean, people are cooperative when there's a problem, so it doesn't get to that point, mostly in our case, because people are responsive on the network side as well to these kind of issues.
So I think, Casual Connect, there's no shortage of ad people around, so I'll just briefly come to their defense and ask, of the issues you've encountered, if you wouldn't mind being transparent about how many of them were your fault and not the ad network SDKs. Never happened. Never happened.
None. No, seriously, obviously, the thing about it is that if it's our fault, we hope that our QA process will catch them, so you don't find anything totally egregious by the time the app is actually released. I won't say we've never had any bugs that have gotten past the QA process. We certainly have, but they haven't been so bad that there has had to have been an emergency release to, deal with it. On the ad network side, it's out of our control and we can only be reactive, and that's why things get to the point that they are.
Doesn't your QA also test ads?
Correct, but we can't test every ad, and in all the countries and all different Android devices, and especially the ad delivery is pretty sophisticated these days, so it's driven by user demographics and other things, and it's difficult to reproduce the same thing in the QA environment.
Really?
Also, until they answer, I can tell you that we've encountered cases where the SDK changed something on their server side and then caused a major crash. So you could not identify this during the QA. It happened several times in apps that were already live for several months, and then all of a sudden, of course, it's not intentional. No one wants to crash. I mean, everyone is losing from those issues. The ad networks as well. It's not. I don't think it's intentional. It's just code. It happens. So.
I wouldn't rule it out that it happens at any time on a publisher side, but I think the issues which are having the most severe impact and which are sticking the most in our memory, I think they're definitely not coming from within our company, but they're mostly coming from outside, where we don't have control, where we cannot react, where we cannot decide ourselves how much time and resources to spend on fixing it, and so that's the most critical issues.
Well, to cut some slack to the ad networks as well, because these are complicated systems, and whatever SDK you have in your game is basically working with another set of SDKs as well. So the scenarios that we are running into are complicated. It's good that there's a relationship and we can solve the issues as we find them, but I guess, as I said, it's not on any side.
Now, I haven't really done my research on ads, but so I might as well ask you guys. So I haven't really seen any native ads in games, and I think native ads they're very elegant. They don't really obstruct the gameplay. They're less obnoxious than interstitials and banner ads, basically. So my question is, are they not really feasible? And if so, is it because it's hard to design the SDK, or if they are feasible, do you have experience with them, and what can you say about them?
Thanks for the question. I think it comes down to the question how you define native ads, because the classical way of defining it is really when you look into Facebook, the native ads are in the feed, right? So you have a feed-like item in there, which is an ad. And these type of ads, they're not really feasible for games because you usually don't have a feed, you don't have any kind of clusters where you can just put one ad amongst other profiles or so. So the standard native ads, as you know them from, for example, Facebook feed, are not really feasible. But I think when you talk about rewarded videos, they are way more natively integrated into your game design, into the flow of the game, into the user's experience with a game. They can also call them native, but they're not traditional native ad format. But I think it really depends a lot on the game and how the game is designed and how it looks. You can also put in kind of native banners somewhere in the game environment. That would also be an approach, which we are actually looking into right now from Wooga's side. But I think it's not really a very standardized and scalable approach yet. But I think it's a very interesting approach, which you could also take as well. Yeah.
One of the things you touched upon, it's not easy to scale the native ads right now because you don't have the same set of mediation and tools that help you to put into the game. So it's one of the reasons, I guess, we are not seeing it that much.
Hi, Dave, you, I think, mentioned earlier that you'd specifically asked not to receive political ads, and we're still getting them. We've had similar situations, and I was curious if you could get into the specifics of how you dealt with that, given that you said you weren't regularly taking people out of your waterfall. Thanks.
Well, first of all, you have the issue of reproducing that like you have with any of the ads in the context that it's occurring. And then we typically go back to the ad network and try to get them to disable individual ads that are in violation of our policies. And we do that. It just is time consuming, and time consuming for us, and it takes some time to get reflected back to the end users. So during that period of time, they still are seeing these things. And if we could disable them very easily and we knew for sure, we would obviously act quite rapidly, and we try to. But typically it's not, even though we want to and we're working on it, we can't really be as effective as we'd like to be. So that's sort of the situation. But I'm not sure I answered really your question on that in terms of how we take it out of the waterfall. I think we tend to take it out if after we talk to the ad network is clueless as to what's causing it, and they think that it is not occurring, in which case we say, well, if you don't have a clue as to why it's occurring, then you're out of the waterfall.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Nice. Good job, guys. Big round of applause, please.
Thank you, everyone.